Good afternoon once again to our listeners on Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, our viewers on the Parliament channel, and those of you joining us via the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView, or via our website www.ttparliament.org. We are less than 1 minute away from 1:30 p.m. and the resumption of the budget debate for fiscal 2017. There's just about 2 or 3 members of the House who have not made contributions just yet. And so we expect that the conclusion of the debate part should occur during this session. And following this, we'll have the commencement of Standing Finance Committee, the initial session where the committee will determine its order of work for the next few days. So we take you over to the chamber for the resumption of the proceedings.
The Honourable, the Deputy Speaker.
We now return to our coverage of the 7th sitting of the House in the 2nd session of the 11th Parliament that takes place on Wednesday, October 12th, 2016.
Good afternoon. We'll resume the budget debate, and I recognize the member for Caroni Central. Member for Caroni Central, I know you sought leave from the Speaker with regards to a particular binder that you would like to exhibit. Yes. You have the permission, but with regards to the other documents, remember the Speaker did mention that you would not be in a position unless you'll be able to code the source and so on. Proceed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is a privilege to be able to say a few words on this 2017 budget. I've had the opportunity to listen and to hear the positions of various presenters in the Parliament. And it has been a spirited debate so far. I want to congratulate the members who have spoken, but especially the members on our side, who really acquitted themselves well and articulated very, very strong points of view, strong perspectives on various elements of the budget, and advocated positions that I think are very important. The leader of the opposition was the first presenter after the Minister of Finance presented, and she was very incisive, very pointed, very deliberate in her presentation, and very impactful. And I noted that she may have well gotten under the skin of a number of members on the other side who took the opportunity to respond. But I want to ask the question, what is the challenge that we face as we come to the end of the year 2017 and enter the year 2017? End of the year 2016 and move into the year 2017. Is the challenge the tenure of the People's Partnership in the 5 years before? I don't think that is the challenge. That may be an excuse for members on the other side. But it is really not even a problem, much less a challenge. Because in the spirit of the continuity of government, in a democratic society, governments come, the people choose, governments go, and the business of government continues. So governments are in and out, and we have been in that situation since 1986, really. And basically, the business of any government is how to deal with the world as it is, how to meet the challenges, and how to advance the game, so to speak, building on what others have done. We did that in the period 2010 to 2015, and I wish the government well in trying to do that, to build on what has been left to them, going forward, carrying the nation forward. But what is the challenge? Is the challenge the dramatic drop in oil and gas? Now, I don't think that that is the challenge either. That is a problem, obviously, that you have to manage, but that is not the challenge that we face. Is the challenge revenue and expenditure and deficit? Well, again, to me, that is a problem that you have to manage, but it is not the challenge that we face. Is the challenge one of living within our means? That is clearly a problem. We've got to address the issue of expenditure and income, but that is really not the big challenge. It is a problem, and we've got to resolve it, we've got to manage it. But what is the real challenge? I think the challenge for us is to recognize, first of all, that although we have been here before in terms of oil and gas prices, that this particular situation in which we find ourselves is not a cyclical situation. That's the first thing. The others came and went, and the cycle sort of continued. But in this particular situation, I think it is important to understand that this particular dramatic drop in the price of oil and gas and commodities generally is not cyclical in nature. So that the challenge for us is really how to get out of the recession, how to develop and manage the economy without reliance on energy. It comes down to that. How to grow the economy, how to create confidence, stimulate the economy and create jobs, and how to create a new, sustainable economy alongside the energy economy that we have, which is not likely to continue in cyclical terms as it has over the last 100 years. And I want to say that in order to meet these challenges of getting out of the recession, of managing the economy without reliance on energy, of growing the economy, of creating confidence, creating jobs, stimulating the economy, and how to create an alternative, side-by-side, sustainable economy alongside energy, you cannot triumph, we cannot triumph over these challenges without an appreciation of the continuity of government and the fact that continuity of government in a democratic society is an essential premise of being part of a democratic society. Now, before I go on, continuing with my initial position, I want to deal with some of the issues raised by the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, and the member for Arouca, the Minister of Planning and Development. I will not spend too much time on this, but I must respond to some of the issues. I do agree with the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, that we are here to do something today for tomorrow's generation, and that we are in fact gatekeepers. And I want to say together with that, if we are gatekeepers, we must recognize that there is a continuity in government and continuance for the country and the society that we represent. He talked about innovative ways, and I think one of the things that I find missing, and I don't mean this in any disparaging way, is that there is very little imagination or innovation in the budget. And I just want to pick up on a couple of things. As I said, I'm not going to be long. I'm just going to respond quickly. The sandals issue, he mentions about being homegrown, that is to say it's Caribbean and so on. But the real issue about sandals is not who it is or what the investment is or what it will do in tourism. It is really what are the terms having to do with land and the terms having to do with beneficial interests to the people of Tobago and the people of Trinidad and Tobago. He mentioned the airlift, he mentioned agricultural benefits. There is no sandals that I know of in the Caribbean that takes one orange from the country that it resides in. Not one orange, I tell you. All of them come from Miami and California. But if you negotiate and you do that, I will commend you. I will thumb the desk for you. So let us see what the land arrangements are, and let us see what the benefits are in terms of what it does for the value chain of tourism. I want to let you know that I did a study on the Caribbean funded by the IDB for sailor as far back as 1997. And when I did that study, Barbados used to get 20 cents on a dollar, a normal tourism. Bahamas used to get 7 cents on a dollar. This is 1997 I'm talking about. I have not followed up on that kind of research since that time. Costa Rica used to get 62 cents on a dollar. So the issue of value chain in tourism is a very important thing, and it's something that I know about and have written about. And I want to say that this business of tourism is a very tough business, and the negotiation issues related to that are very important. You talked about OAS, member for St. Anne's North, St. Anne's Northwest, Port of Spain North, sorry. Port of Spain, yeah. You talked about OAS. All I want to say about that is, you know, okay, so you didn't like the contract. You feel that we should have done something. The road was built. They went bankrupt, etc. Did you not use triggers in the system that was established to get your $671 million? Wasn't it built into the system that had been negotiated that you would get those six? Would you have been able to call on the banks? Would Citibank have given you the money without quarrel? Would the other banks, although they tested it in court, would you have had the means to go to court and win the money had not these things been built into the arrangements that had been done under NIDCO at the time? So let us not sensationalize the issue. Nobody tried to do anything to undermine the country. They did the best contract they could, and they organized their business. You mentioned the fact that this was a corruption-busting government, and the Prime Minister was recognized for busting corruption and so on. And you said you were on the business of successful prosecution, seizure of assets, tracking beneficial interests, and you had international backup to do this. I think that that is good for the country if you can strengthen the anti-corruption capacity of the country. The country needs to be an honest country. You need to have decent officials, and you have to have governments in the country that people could have faith in. So I don't have any problem with that. But the problem I have is the way in which you present these things, as if somehow you are in a court in which you are finding guilty members of this parliament. If you have an issue, address it. I mean, there's no problem with that. You talk about local government reform. I don't think there's one line in this budget about local government reform. All right, I don't think so. I did see $441 million allocated to the Ministry of Rural Development. And I do not know what that $441 million is because it does not say local government reform. So I want to see what is the connection when we come to committee stage between the numbers there and local government reform, and what are the specifics of the allocation of that $441 million. You talk about legislation that is coming, FATF, CFATF. You talked about FATCA. I won't go into FATCA at this point. We had a long discussion on that, and it will come up for debate again. All I can say on that, appoint the Joint Select Committee, and we will talk. You'll see all the amendments. But, Minister, I want to remind you that I was abroad, and I came to you and told you that this country was in danger over this FATF issue and was on the verge of being blacklisted. And I told you that you should attend to it because I had been approached by people where I went to a conference. I am as concerned about the country as you are. So don't come and threaten us with legislation. If the legislation is good, if I didn't talk to you, Minister of Finance, I spoke to the
members, Honorable Member,
yes.
You did say that you would not go into any details on the factor. Please get to the point so that we can.
I'm talking about the budget, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Go ahead.
He mentioned FATF and CFATF. So I spoke to you on this. You know that to be a fact. And it was in the interest of the country. I didn't make any big noise about it. All right? So when you come and you say you have 23 votes, as if that is a liability, and you then expect the members on this side to simply vote for you because you bring a bill, I mean, that is not reasonable. The parliament doesn't work like that. You know, you do a bill, there's a parliamentary process. And I will say something about those things later. And you talk about the CDA and that you are going to challenge the leases that because they are not on the best commercial terms for CDA or for the country. If you feel that there is something wrong with some of those leases and you want to take the matter to court, I am sure that the court will give you a hearing. What I would say, though, is that from what I know about leases that were done under the CDA between 2010 and 2015, there is not a single lease that they did between the years that the board then did between the years 2010 2015 that is inferior in any way, and every single one of them is superior to any lease done at any time in the history of Shagaramas up to 2010. So I will simply say that and say no more on it. The member, I just can't remember the constituency. Is it Aruka Maloney?
Yes.
Yeah, the member for Aruka Maloney, the Minister of Planning, she raised some issues about CSO. She said 4 officers were caught not doing their work properly, and she referred the matter to, I think, the police or whoever it is. Listen, man, there is a management problem in CSO. Why do you bring it to the parliament? You know, this is based on quality assurance. They hire these people. These people are all CXC people, you know. They don't have university degrees. The people who do the checking outside, what they do is they do a series over a period going to the same households so that they can figure out on a consistent basis what is happening. And some of them get smart and some of them lazy. And then what they do, therefore, is they use the old numbers, all right, in order to extrapolate without going out and doing the field work. And quality assurance traps them. And they get rid of them all the time. That's normal procedure. You know, you politicize that, you bring it into Parliament. I mean, oh gosh, man, have a heart now. This happens all over the world in any organization. And now, national statistical, you talk about the National Statistical Institute, you talk about international standards, everything up to date now, good governance. And all of that you say you did in 1 year, right? Or you bring everything was crashing when you came in 2015 September, and everything good now. Up, down to governance, you organize everything. So I want to read from the review of the economy. Okay? This is your Minister of Finance who has responsibility for this. It's not me. Okay? So I just want to get the correct place. I hope I can get it quickly. Yeah. So this is from the review of the economy, page 20. It talks about the CSO and so on, and it says the methodology and procedures utilized by the CSO in the estimation have been extensively reviewed, modified as necessary, and approved by regional and international bodies such as Caribbean Regional Technical Assistance Center, CARTAC, and the International Monetary Fund. The process continues as part of the CSO current transformation exercise. You know when these things were started? They were started in 2013. They got the upgrade in 2013 and 14. Okay, and this continues. We had IMF people dealing with the rebasing of the inflation rate in the year 2012. You know, so on page 21, I read again from page 21. In response, let me get it, sorry. The government of Trinidad and Tobago approved in June 2015 the transformation of the CSO into the National Statistical Institute. Who was in government in June 2015? In June 2015, who was in government? Which cabinet you think approved this? The new NSI, National Statistical Institute, would function as an independent, autonomous agency responsible for the production, development, and management of the country's national statistical system. It was the People's Partnership Cabinet and government that approved this and that set it in motion. You all are a bunch of misleaders, man. Listen to this again. In response to the closure of the National Statistical Building in 2013, this was when the union said that there was it was a health hazard, and they decided to use certain strategies and so on. It was very difficult. Accommodation in Port of Spain was also difficult. We were trying to get it. But it says here, in response to the closure of the so and so and so, a new building, Plaza 47, was acquired and outfitted to house the CSO. The process of moving CSO staff into Plaza 47 commenced in mid-June 2015, and over 75% of all officers has now been relocated. This process is expected to be completed shortly. And then it talks about the understanding, the MOU between Central Bank and the CSO, which the Minister of Finance came here in 2014 and questioned, by the way, when he had done it. He said, what did the Central Bank know about statistics? And he questioned it, but it talks about the fact that these officers are, first of all, collaborating, and secondly, being trained. This was initiated, I think, in 2013, if I'm not mistaken, on ongoing training updates with CARTAC and so on and so on. So all of these things about the CSO, I mean, let's not try and create a Nancy story. Let's tell the truth about what happened. You inherited a CSO that had, in fact, brought all the statistics up to date. When I left here in September, the documentation for unemployment data at the end of 2014 was already completed, and it was 2 quarters back, which is the norm. And all of those things have been done, and you can continue with it, that's fine. But don't come and claim any big magical transformation of the CSO. On the CDA, again, you talk about we built a boardwalk for $37 million, 2 phases of it. The 3rd phase was to go. I don't know if that will ever happen under this government. And you say that you spend $1.6 million on infrastructure to maintain it, and talking about the quality and so on. You neglect the thing for an entire year. You all did nothing with it. You wanted to make everything crash in Chagaramas. Yes. Okay? So you spend $1.6 million to fix the boardwalk. That is something to complain about? I mean, really. You talk about the employees, that we were going to fire the employees. That is not true. We were in touch, we were in constant engagement with James Lambert, who was the head of the union, and we were discussing 2 separate tracks that might be chosen. One is to retain all employees, but to change the job specifications because the demands in Chagaramas were changing. And the other was to basically create contract teams with the workers who would then be contracted to the CDA and who would be given all the equipment, and who will, on the contract, they could then become entrepreneurial. They did not have to work for the CDA alone. They could take the choices. Those were the options that were available. And all the leases that we did were reasonable leases. They all benefit the country. They bring in millions of dollars for the country. They are not like the Pier 1 lease, for instance, which is $1,200 a month. All right? And it has no escalation and review clause. And it is not like the unregulated leases. One of them was simply a letter written to somebody saying that the lease was $40,000 a year. We didn't do business so. All the things were contracted, they were properly negotiated, and it takes time to negotiate a lease, you know. And these things that you said about the CEO, that she was fired and so on, well, yes, you all fired people as you came in, you got rid of them, as the member for Chaguanas West was saying about the member for Dabadi O'Meara. They walked in places and they say, well, you know, everybody else who is a 5th columnist will be liquidated. So that was the approach. But that lady, I mean, she looked after the affairs of the institution, and she was fired. And if I am not mistaken, I don't know what are the details of it, but I have heard that she has written a pre-action protocol letter.
Go ahead and see about it, member. Members, please, your electronic devices are to be on silent.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I've heard that that lady has sent a pre-action protocol letter to the Chagaramas Development Authority, and I imagine that too will find its way in court. About town and country planning, She talked about the fact that there are 2,000 enforcement matters. You know how much I met there? 6,000. I met 6,000. And we had to go through, I had to get my officers to go through, and on the basis of that, I said, eliminate as many as possible that do not make sense or that are dated. And then let us get to those that really make sense in the country to enforce. And we proceeded to do that. You talk about the fact that 2 court cases were found against me, so to speak, in the Eddie Hart Savannah. That was a total error. Town and country planning approves the site and the building specification, etc. The client was the Ministry of Works. The Ministry of Sport. It was the Ministry of Sport's responsibility to engage the community for what they were going to build. And there was a misunderstanding about this. You know, it is a simple thing. And the other decision about the batching plant, the fact that you cannot review a decision that you made. If you make a decision and people write to you, this is done by a review board, and people write to you and say, these are the new situations, this is what was involved in the last decision, this information did not come to light, so and so. What do you do but refer that to the board? That is what you do. So, all of these things, they are non-issues. And the most important thing that was said that I want to deal with is she said that she is reviewing the published policy under my time, reviewing the local area plans, and she has an internal investigation at TCPD. I want to say how TCPD works. TCPD has nothing to do with the minister. Nothing from TCPD comes to the minister. Only appeals come to the minister. No, it goes, if somebody appeals, it goes to the appeal board. And when the appeal board makes a judgment, it comes to the minister. Nothing in TCPD comes to the minister. And what I do want to say, though, about the local area plans and all of these issues, I want to say that these were policies done on the recommendation of public servants. I want to stress again the continuity of government.
Honourable Member, member for Laventille West and also member for Tabaquite, you all are free to exit the chamber and have your discourse, please, if it's possible. I have spoken. Go ahead, proceed, Honourable Member.
We made changes to the policy. I want to give you an idea of what we did. What we did was that we allowed 2-story buildings in certain communities. So these were basically communities. Any local community, you could have a 2-story building for whatever purpose, whether it's a house or whether it's a commercial center. In rural towns, we allowed 2- or 3-story buildings. In urban towns, we allowed 3- or 4-story buildings. In the municipal core, around places like Curep, Tunapuna, Sawa, etc., we allowed 4- to 6-story buildings. Special areas, we had different dispensations, etc. And the whole idea was to open up the country and give people a chance to make construction boom in this country, to create the conditions in which you could have these spaces. The other thing that people do not understand, and I don't know if the Minister of Planning appreciates what I'm going to say here, is that land is a serious capital asset. In the traditional notion of how economics works is land, labor, and capital. We talk now about knowledge and we talk about skills and all of those things, and those are important, but it's land, labor, and capital. When you suppress the development of land, when you suppress the movement of the growth capacity of land across your country, when you limit the growth capacity to Port of Spain or to the East-West corridor, what do you think you do to the rest of the country? And this has been so both in Chagaramas and in the rest of Trinidad and Tobago, you have an underdevelopment and suppression strategy for land development and for commercial possibilities in Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to see what the minister does with that policy, because I want to say, if I have to personally take the minister to court on the issue of the land policy, I cannot understand how because the minister cannot arbitrarily come and decide that the policy that was made by government in the normal course of its duties, in the normal process of carrying out its responsibilities, will be reversed, and we will see. All right, and the final issue was the issue of, oh gosh, she dragged into the parliament of this country the member for Aruka Maloney. The member for Aruka Maloney dragged into the parliament of this country the names of people from the University of the West Indies. I do not know what to say about that. All I can say is that the two people she mentioned, the member for Aruka Maloney, were two among several people, and I want to explain something. The money for this project, which was to write a policy for Trinidad and Tobago for the next 10 years, 2015 to 2025, was supported by the IDB with grant money provided by the IDB.
Grant money, yeah. Grant.
I established what was called an applied research unit in the Ministry of Planning. They consisted of national scholarship winners, and most of them with master's degrees. I mixed them with public servants, and I brought some recruits at master's level from the University of the West Indies. The IDB then said, you need to have a lead consultant, and that person we want to make the choice of. And I won't call the person's name, but he's a person well known, he's written books, etc. He's an American, he's a Latin American, working out of the IDB. And he was assigned to the project. They then wanted to hire international consultants for the rest of the project. I said, no, we have brain power in Trinidad and Tobago. And I am prepared to have an international consultant coordinate the project. But I want all the other consultants to be local. And that is how the local consultants came. And you notice she only mentioned two names. I don't want to deal with her strategy on that, because I don't like to cause confusion and division in this society. But I do want to say that there were other names in the pool. That is all I will say. The second thing is that when I did this arrangement with the IDB then tried to say that the local consultant should have a different rate from the foreign consultant. I balked. I said, no, they are doing the same intellectual work, and you cannot tell me because they're local, they are going to be paid a different fee from the international consultants. And they agreed, and that explains the project. It explains the hiring of the people from the university. It explains where the money came from. It was not involved in wastage. It was involved in a principle. And the end result was this. And she said she can't find the document. Look at here. Action 25, 2015 to 25. And I want to say the member for Laventille West, if he is straightforward, and I know he is, will verify this. When I was a Minister of Planning, he called me and asked me for the soft copy of the 2020 documents. And I made it available to him within 2 days. Is that correct? Through officials in my ministry. I made those documents available because, as far as I'm concerned, they were legitimate opposition. They had been in government. That was a government document. And if he wanted a soft copy of it, he was entitled to it. I gave it to him. And when I left the ministry, Madam Speaker, I left these documents in the ministry. I took a copy. I have a copy here. And this is the work that she is accusing. I don't want to call the people's names here. I don't think it is fair. This is the work that she is accusing people of not doing. I have their names here on the work that they did. And this is a document which is a policy document. And if the government wanted to hit the ground running, they would have taken this document and simply revised it and gone. Because I want to say that I worked, I want to say that I worked on Vision 2020, and there were problems with Vision 20. They did nothing in the tertiary policy that I produced together with a team on Vision 2020. They were not rejected. You all did. It is like, I don't want to say an unkind term. I don't want to say an unkind term. I don't want to say an unkind term. But the end result is that we will see what the idea behind this was, just as they are proceeding with 2030, which is that you do the document, you bring it to Parliament, and you allow for consultation, as we did with the National Spatial Strategy. Well, let us see. Anyway, we are going to move. We are going to move. I just want to make sure that the minister knows that what she said here was untrue. This is the document produced. And I am really concerned about the whole tone of government. I've said that before. I am very concerned about the thinking of the government. In many ways, if I take it in small ways, I will say I'm very concerned about the fact that laptops is not seen as a strategy for education. I was the Minister of Education I've known for a long time, and I have the greatest respect for him. But I cannot understand how a Minister of Education could say that the laptops were being misused at home or not used at home. What if the children play games? No big deal. You know, that is part of the whole business. And the Minister of Health indicated that how they're not pelting stone at guava or climbing guava tree anymore. They now use their thumbs to do this. Do you know that that is what allows you to manipulate the equipment for very precision surgery? Yeah. I don't think you all appreciate what is happening to the world. Sometimes when I come into this parliament and I hear the government speak, and last week Sunday I was looking at 60 Minutes and I saw the story about the robot, basically artificial intelligence, Watson, and what Watson was able to do, and the other robots that they were making in other universities, etc., and what they were able to do. And I think of what we are doing to our children and how we are viewing education, and I want to say we are taking the country backwards. The thinking is wrong. And this strategy of the government, you know, you talk about the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West. He comes here and talks about the legislation he's going to bring, and now he has 23 votes in that very arrogant way of saying that the government, the opposition had to fall in line or else, and the rest of the society should pressure us into doing what the government wants. Let me tell you something. Your whole approach is divisive from the point of view of talking about moving installation from Napa to Sapa, of talking about the Couva Hospital as if it were an aberration, but the Sangre Grande Hospital is okay. You do any study for the Sangre Grande Hospital?
None.
I mean, how could you do that? You talk about East Port of Spain. I did 40-something projects in East Port of Spain. I did 40-something projects, and I invited you to many of them. Some you came, some you didn't. I invited former Member of Parliament McIntosh. She was there at some of them. I mean, we did things. And you talk about us as we don't care about the country, as if we are unpatriotic, we are destructive. This is wrong for you to do that. I don't understand, quite frankly, why the government takes that tone, why they think the way they do, and why they embark on this kind of divisive strategy. It really, really is a problem. And you have to, when I look at the budget, when I look at the 2016 budget, I see all the things. By the way, one of the things I didn't mention was the NGC issue, where he said, you know, we raided the NGC and so on. I will deal with that, but I see in the 2016 budget you had a 4 billion dividend payout from the NGC. Why didn't leave it there? But we are here to talk about the budget. We are here to talk about the budget and some of the issues in the budget. And I want to, because they have spent so much time really providing misinformation, I do want to deal with some of the issues. The first thing has to do with this NGC. They talk about raiding the NGC. The profit for the NGC increased from $3 billion to $9 billion in our time. Okay? The dividends increased from $1.5 billion to $4 billion. The exception was 2015, when an additional special dividend of $1.5 billion was requested as a result of the Phoenix Park IPO. Yeah.
Your original 45 minutes have been spent. You're entitled to 10 more minutes.
Thank you very much,
You may
Madam
proceed.
Speaker. I would like to use it. They talk about the fact that we increased that the debt to GDP ratio when we left was 46%. The IMF referred to it at the time as low but rising debt. He says that the Minister of Finance says he will take it up to 65%. It looks more like 70% to me if they use the money. But the real challenge in that is that how are we going to pay it back if we don't grow the economy? And this is the crux of the matter, CRUX of the matter, that I would like to address. And I want to say, in terms of investment, 2014 to 2017, it was BP with Juniper. 2015, it was BG Chevron with Lobster. 2016, EOG and BP with Sercan. 2016, BHP Billiton, Angostura Phase. And all of these are things that we put in place prior to 2014. In 2016-17, you're going to have BP onshore compression, Savannah exploration, Angostura 3, 2018-19, BP with Angeline, and so on, including Lauren Manatee, which in fact came to some fruition when the president of Venezuela came here to Trinidad and Tobago in the midst of his own crisis and met with the Prime Minister here. And it is good in the continuity of government that you are proceeding with it. But don't come with the air of Columbus on these matters, okay? By the way, today is October 12th, and that was the day, by the way, many, many hundreds of years ago that Columbus touched this shore. I have a lot of problems with the budget, some of which I've mentioned before. It has to the part of the problem with the budget and the reason why they are in this crisis is not so much the oil price and all of these things, although I concede that those are important and critical issues. Part of it really has to do with the way that they managed over the last year, the way they managed the cash flow, and the end result is that things turned out very badly. This is a very volatile world and a very complex place. As we sit now, I just read on the online mail that Russia has moved missiles to the edge of Poland, that they are calling all their people from outside into Russia, that the tension between the United States and Russia has gone on. And what I'm saying is that any moment, in any part of the world, something can happen which makes a difference in our time. But he did not manage the cash flow situation well. Very little was achieved by the government over the last fiscal. The Minister of Finance was woefully short on his revenue targets by his own admission. The fiscal gap is 16 billion. He is raising debt at high interest rate without figuring out how to pay for it, and he is bringing the fiscal gap down to a smaller deficit by borrowings. The country has been plunged into serious negative growth in every single sector, and he is basing everything on a rebound energy strategy. And therefore, I mean, something has to be terribly wrong with this budget, you know. But I don't want to deal with that. I want to say that he talks about stranded pools of gas and oil. We told him that in the first budget debate. The lease operator farm outs, we told them, go ahead with that. The Venezuela Manatee field, we pointed out where we had reached and that they should proceed with that. All of those things we did in the first budget. And in the review, we said, look, we had to find a way of living within our means, create the capacity to grow, that growth was the most important thing. And that is what I want to deal with here today. I don't have time to deal with everything else. Madam Speaker, how much time do I have?
6, so you have roughly 5 minutes.
About 5 minutes. So I just want to deal with, I want to say that I'm thankful to my constituents for their contribution during the budget session that we had. I have a lot of issues that they raised here, and those were very important. And I also want to say that I want to extend my thanks to some of the ministers who did heed my letters and my petitions, etc., and I got some positive responses from them. I want to say the Minister of Education did give a positive response. I wait to see if this will be actualized. The Minister of Works did give a positive response. I want to see also if this will be actualized. We'll see. If they are actualized, I thank you. Okay. All right. I don't know if it started. If it started, fine. I agree. I thank you. No, I didn't say thank. Yes.
Member for Caroni Central and member for Laventille West. Please, and member, if maybe you direct your conversation this way, you won't be distracted.
Well, he's right in front of me. Okay. Madam Speaker, so I thank the ministers who have been responsive. But I want to get into this business. You see, I want to close on this issue, what to do, because they say we criticize and we don't say anything. And I showed you from our budget debate and the presentations that I made, I didn't only criticize, I made positive recommendations about what we should do. And now 1 year late, they are doing some of the things. But the situation is this. We have an energy situation which we know is going to get better because of the investments that we facilitated between 2012 and 2015. And we know that it's going to get better in 17, in 18, in 19, up to 2022, things will be pretty good here. So there's an energy trajectory is in place. So you know that. So leave it alone and maybe get more investment in it, and let's do that. The second thing is that you have a manufacturing sector. You have a services sector. And these two are crashing in the country. When you look at so what you need to do is to deal with that. You have a problem with too much employment and high cost to the state, let's say in something like CPEP. We had started a negotiation with the Manufacturers Association, AmCham, to take the CPEP workers, move them into the system, set up a training system, and you, over time, let's say over 3 years, 4 years, you are able to absorb these workers, skill them. Some will not want to go, but most people will want to go. And things are hard, people will want jobs. And these are sustainable jobs. So you could move the exports, you could double the exports in manufacturing, you could double the exports in services. There is a good program that I left at the ministry having to do with services, funded by the IDB. I see the minister put $12 million in that this time. That can help. You can double the services, you can double the manufacturing, you can create thousands of jobs, and you can also get rid of CPEP without firing people. You move them into productive labor, and it can be done. Now you can't move CPEP workers into all the services sector, but you can move them in some, like tourism, etc. But the ICT-based things, that's where your university graduates can come in and you can absorb them as the exports grow. But there is a third sector that you've got to develop, and that is the renewable energy sector. And I don't mean what we are doing now, I mean more than that. What we call the blue and the green economy, and what we also call as the silver economy. Because when you look at the statistics here, she said Roger Hussein did no work. He did an important piece of work on manpower planning. And on the basis of that, you want me to take it out? Look at here. It wasn't worthless. It's worthless to you because you don't understand it, you don't know how to apply it. What he said in the study is that we had 600,000 people who were under 30. We had an aging population based on the 2011 statistics.
Central, your speaking time is now spent. Member for San Fernando East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I seek your leave with respect to Standing Order 4410.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is a privilege to join this debate, albeit at a late stage, on the Appropriation Bill 2017, as presented by the Honourable Minister of Finance. And Madam Speaker, let me first start by joining the chorus of congratulating the member for Diego Martin Northeast for his excellent presentation of the 2017. As well, the Minister of Planning and Member of Parliament for Aruka Malone. And further, let me also extend congratulations and commendation to the technocrats, the members of their team, who would have worked tirelessly on this appropriation bill, Madam Speaker.
Well put it, man. Well put it.
Madam Speaker, this is my second budget debate, and this time around I had a little more experience in this budgeting process. And it would be remiss of me, Madam Speaker, if I didn't also thank my permanent secretary at the Ministry of Housing, the chairmen and CEOs of all the agencies under its purview for their support and prudent management during this difficult year that we've just faced. But Madam Speaker, let me just pause here, as a member for Couva South has just sought to prompt me.
Salary increase.
I want to reflect on the contribution for the member from...
Member for Couva South.
Put him out.
Member for Couva South. Could I kindly have the attention and silence of everybody else? Member for Couva South, I have been gracious in inviting you when you feel restless to take a walk, but, you know, I think you might at some stage expend all that graciousness. Please continue.
Madam Speaker, a little too much sugar. Madam Speaker, as I was saying, I wanted to reflect on the contribution to the member of Oropouche East. Madam Speaker, when the member rose to make his contribution, I listened attentively because, of course, he is the shadow MP for the Ministry of Housing, and I wanted to hear what rumors or scoops he would have come with. And Madam Speaker, when the member started in his contribution, I expected certain things. I expected the member to say that the government is the worst. I expected the member to say that the finance minister is the worst. I expected the member to say that the houses built by the HDC under the former minister, member for Diego Martin West, were the worst. I expected him to say that I like to stoop and drive fast. But Madam Speaker, what I did not expect was for the member to attack the children of government members in this chamber. I didn't expect the member for Oropouche East to try and link the children of a government member to a terrorist organization operating in the Middle East by race. Because he's a seasoned and experienced.
But he's a UNC though.
Member for Diego Martin Northeast, if you could just withdraw that comment that I heard. Thank you very much.
Madam Speaker, he's a seasoned member in this House, and I did not expect it. They are seasoned members on that side. I didn't expect the member for Tewarie to adopt the statement. I didn't expect the member for Tabakit to adopt that statement without even knowing the circumstances from which the picture was taken. And as a new member, Madam Speaker, I always thought that there was a convention in this House that the children of members are out of bounds. Madam Speaker, in my short time here, I've never seen an attack so low and so disdainful in this House. But Madam Speaker, as I've been hearing, when they go low, we'll just go high.
That's right.
And Madam Speaker, another low blow attack was the attack on the chairman of the HDC. And I have to defend him now because he can't come into this chamber to defend himself. Madam Speaker, I have investigated the matters and I can now report to this House. The chairman of the HDC has no assistant and has no secretary at the HDC. The chairman of the HDC operates at the board level and is ably assisted by his board members and the corporate secretary, Ms. Lightbourne. The matter raised by the member for Oropouche East surrounds the assistant of the acting managing director. And his assistant works for a salary of $10,000 a month. She has been on the waiting list for the past 15 years, and she was fortunate enough to get a house at Oasis Gardens in Chaguanas. The townhouse unit cost around $800,000 to $900,000, Madam Speaker. And during the walkthrough, like so many walkthroughs, $800,000 to $900,000, thank you. And during the walkthroughs, as with many other walkthroughs, Madam Speaker, it was discovered that the unit was uninhabitable. It was filled with defects and it was vandalized. And by public tender, the unit had to be refurbished for around $100,000.
Special secretary.
But if the member is taking great umbrage, Madam Speaker, with the cost to refurbish, I wonder if the member is aware that under his tenure, one of his favorite managers in the HDC, Ms. Amelie Carter, her home was repaired at a cost of $300,000. Sole Select.
Those with glass houses.
Madam Speaker, it is abhorrent that members could use this house for these low blow attacks. And I can say with pride, Madam Speaker, that the chairman of the HDC is an upstanding citizen, and this country owes a debt of gratitude to his human service.
Oh, yes. That's right.
And Madam Speaker, if you knew him as well as I do, you would know this. But Madam Speaker,
you get an automatic extension.
Madam Speaker, what are national budgets? A national budget is a statement of government planned receipts and expenditure. The national budget is the most important instrument that any government has to carry out its policies and affects the everyday lives of ordinary citizens. It also affects the future of society. And therefore, Madam Speaker, it is no coincidence that this year's budgeting theme is entitled Shaping Our Future, a Blueprint for Transformation and Growth. Madam Speaker, during the 2015 election campaign, I canvassed the entire constituency of San Fernando East, talking and listening to constituents. And since my election, Madam Speaker, I have continued to engage with my constituents, and I had an opportunity to talk with them, to gauge their opinions and views since the reading of the 2017 national budget, to find out what they thought about the macro environment the country now finds itself in, and some of the fiscal measures announced in the budget. On the macroeconomic environment, Madam Speaker, the people of Trinidad and Tobago and the people of San Fernando East and the people of Koke and St. Madeleine understand that as a country, we have experienced a precipitous fall in revenues on account of a decline in petroleum prices, compounded by a fall in petroleum production that has resulted in a decrease between 2014 and 2016 in annual revenues of 92%. Madam Speaker, you don't have to be an economist to understand that in the face of such a sharp decline, we cannot continue to spend money and maintain the high levels of expenditure that we have become accustomed to. And one of the first things any responsible government has to do is to begin to scale back by cutting expenditure immediately. It cannot be business as usual in these difficult times. And the people of Trinidad and Tobago understand this. They understand, Madam Speaker, why over the past year we've had to deal with GATE and a number of state enterprises that have become woefully inefficient, wasteful, and complacent. We have to reduce the high levels of recurrent expenditure. The people understand that we have to do a lot more with a lot less. The people know that one of the fastest ways to raise immediate revenue and to stabilize the economy is to raise taxes. And in light of our current economic circumstances, they understand the need to do that at this time. The proposed taxes in alcohol and cigarettes is one of the revenue-raising measures to be implemented by this government in this year. Madam Speaker, almost every person I spoke to in the constituency of San Fernando East either had a close relative who was afflicted with some lifestyle disease. Citizens understand the huge health costs and other burdens associated with such diseases. At our present rate, 60% of the population will be afflicted by a chronic lifestyle disease in their lifetime, according to health reports. Madam Speaker, the population fully understands that by increasing taxes on cigarettes and alcohol, quite apart from raising revenue, government is simply looking out for its citizens, looking to change the behaviors to avoid the negative consequences on our health as a people and the nation's soaring health bill. And lastly, Madam Speaker, with respect to the new tax bracket, the population is pleased that this government has stuck and stood by its word to spread fairly the heavy burden of adjustment at this time. In times of abundance, we have all benefited from the big ticket subsidies, some more than others, and consequently, Madam Speaker, we must all fairly bear the burden and sacrifice now so as to shape our future for a brighter tomorrow. Madam Speaker, let me now turn to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development's report on what we have been able to achieve in fiscal 2016. As you're aware, I was appointed to the ministry 7 months ago, an assignment I humbly accepted, and I immediately began meeting with the relevant units and agencies under the ministry to ensure that we attain our strategic goals according to our official policy framework. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Housing is the state agency responsible for carrying out government's housing policy. It is mandated to provide quality, affordable housing solutions for the citizens of this country. And there are three main pillars of government's housing policy. And Madam Speaker, these need to be restated because they were lost under the last administration. The first pillar, Madam Speaker, is affordability. Affordability through the provision of affordable homes, mortgages, and home ownership programs like the rent-to-own program. The second pillar, Madam Speaker, is that of accessibility through the construction of new housing units targeted to low and middle income households in high demand geographical locations. And the third pillar, Madam Speaker, the improvement of the quality of living for existing homeowners through the provision of home improvement grants and subsidies and the upgrade of squatter communities under the State Lands Regularization of Tenure Act. Madam Speaker, let me first deal with the programs within the ministry to improve the quality of living for its citizens. The ministry offers home improvement grants through the Home Improvement Grant Program. And home improvement subsidies also are targeted towards low-income families for the purpose of conducting basic repairs like leaking roofs, like rewiring a home, and even putting on an extension. And these programs are expected to reduce housing poverty, maintain and improve the national housing stock, and as well, Madam Speaker, to reduce the demand on the HDC for new homes every year. Madam Speaker, with respect to the disbursement of the home improvement grants in 2016, each grant being $15,000, the ministry disbursed a total of 753 grants at a cost of $11.3 million to successful applicants across Trinidad and Tobago, and not just in selected constituencies as occurred over the last 5 years. And going forward, Madam Speaker, we will improve the processes related to the disbursement of these grants. It is not just that the applicants apply and receive grants, Madam Speaker. Estimates must be done, inspections must be carried out. And these checks and balances are what cause delays in the system. We are working to ensure that the recipients have quicker access to their monies during the disbursement to ensure a smoother process in the conduct of their repairs. And Madam Speaker, the home improvement subsidies, this is a component of the Neighborhood Upgrading Program, which is funded by a loan agreement between Government of Trinidad and Tobago and the IDB. And applicants to this program are required to provide a matching contribution of $20,000 to be spent on home improvement repair before accessing the subsidy. Madam Speaker, for fiscal year 2016, the ministry disbursed 415 subsidies at a cost of $19.5 million, a 34% increase over that of 2015, where only 263 subsidies were disbursed. And Madam Speaker, quite apart from the improvement in the quality of life of the recipients of these grants and subsidies, the trickle-down effect on the local economy, Madam Speaker, that these repair activities have is extremely positive, as the recipients have to procure goods and services from local hardwares and from contractors. And in fiscal 2017, the ministry will continue to meet its objectives in relation to the maintenance and improvement of the national housing stock by continuing to pursue these programs. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Housing, we also improve the living conditions of homeowners using another essential component of the neighborhood upgrading program. This is called squatter regularization and upgrading. And through the LSA, Madam Speaker, the ministry provides infrastructural upgrades to squatter communities, conducting infrastructural work such as paving of roads, the installation of drainage systems, sewage systems, and improving the electricity supply to these areas. And the main objective here, Madam Speaker, is to improve the standard of living of the low income and vulnerable in society. And during fiscal year 2016, approximately $59 million was spent, and 1,000 families benefited from the infrastructural upgrading works to sites, not just in our constituencies, Madam Speaker, Kangali Street, Valencia, Arena Road, Freeport, Ramlal Street, Pinal, and in sites located in Guayaguari and in Muruga. And going forward, Madam Speaker, we will continue through the LSA to improve the lives of the low-income and vulnerable citizens in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker? Sure. Madam Speaker, allow me to focus now on this government's accelerated housing program, which is designed to provide newly constructed, affordable, quality housing solutions to qualifying citizens. And there is no doubt, Madam Speaker, that the accelerated housing program implemented in 2003 by a PNM administration is one of the most prolific housing initiatives ever seen in this country. And unlike the member for Orapooch East, I would say that the golden age of housing was between the years 2003 to 2009, where the government was able to construct 15,756 housing units at a cost of $5.5 billion. Madam Speaker, by comparison, only 3,900 units were built by the last administration.
How much?
3,900 units were built by the last administration. One quarter. At a cost of $5.4 billion. And Madam Speaker, the high cost to produce such a small number of units naturally meant that the cost per housing units would have been extraordinarily high to the average citizen. For example, Madam Speaker, townhouse units were built at $900,000 in Cypress Gardens and Oasis Gardens. And compare that, Madam Speaker, to the pre-2010 cost of $400,000 for similar townhouse units. A complete departure from the first pillar of the government's housing policy, that is affordability. It is noteworthy, Madam Speaker, to note that between the years 2010 to 2015, there were no corresponding increases in the cost of construction input. Madam Speaker, when I first entered the ministry, I was confronted with the news that the amount due and owing to contractors was a massive $800 million. From ongoing works to 25 unfinished housing projects, several of them having been procured prior to 2010. And Madam Speaker, we were faced with a debt of $800 million, but our allocation for the year was just $160 million. So we were at a crisis point because contractors were calling for their money, contractors were threatening to sue. And there was no further available funding from the Ministry of Finance to extinguish these debts. But what did we do, Madam Speaker? We got down to work. Myself and the chairman of the HGC, Mr. Newman George. We first called the contractors, Madam Speaker, and explained to them our position, our financial position. And the contractors, they understood, they were patient, they agreed to slow the rate of works in some instances. And we negotiated in good faith, Madam Speaker, and we got them to hold their hands. Madam Speaker, we simply could not go on business as usual because we were at a crisis point. We had to turn the crisis into opportunity, and that is what we did. We took a long and hard look at the organization in trying to determine ways to become more efficient and lean by reducing unnecessary expenditure and cutting waste. In taking that close look at the organization, Madam Speaker, we realized that the HDC all this time was sitting on a gold mine. Madam Speaker, the HDC had on its books verifiable receivables to the tune of $3.5 billion in unconverted and uncollected mortgages. You see, Madam Speaker, when the HDC enters into rent-to-own agreements and license-to-occupy agreements for specified periods, they enter into these agreements for specified periods with licensees and tenants. And during these periods, the HDC must receive all its statutory approvals for the development, and thereafter they call upon the tenant and the licensee to come in and convert their arrangements to mortgages. And this is important, Madam Speaker, because during the course of these agreements, the installments paid by the licensees and the tenants go into an escrow account held by the TTMF, and they remain unavailable for use by the HDC. And only until these arrangements are converted into mortgages would the full purchase price of the units be made available to the HDC for its use and reinvestment into the housing program. We discovered, Madam Speaker, that under the last administration, they simply neglected to pursue these monies. And why would they? They had billions of dollars at their disposal. Madam Speaker, we immediately met with the TTMF and we set up a dedicated team to retrieve these monies. We embarked on an initiative called the Mortgage Conversion Caravan, and we set about on a roadshow. We're going into all the HDC communities to urge and sensitize homeowners, tenants and licensees to come in and convert their mortgages. You see, Madam Speaker, for a homeowner, there are numerous benefits to having the proper legal title to their units. They can benefit from tax deductions, and they can use their properties as collateral in home equity loans. It generates wealth, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, for the period February 2016 to September 2016, I am proud to say that we have collected approximately $250 million in receivables from these conversions. Madam Speaker, in September alone, we collected $76 million in revenue from these initiatives. And Madam Speaker, let me take the opportunity at once to publicly thank the team for their hard and diligent work in assisting homeowners in their conversions on one hand, and in allowing us to consistently reduce our receivables account on the other. You see, the majority of employees at the HDC, they want to work, Madam Speaker. There are just a few who want to copy emails and provide to other members and so on. But the majority want to work. They want to get the HDC, and by extension the country, back to more stable waters. Madam Speaker, going forward, we will continue in our collection drive, and in the process, we are working towards the reduction of the delinquency rates of remittances to the HDC. And these works will go a long way to pay for ongoing works and to increase the rate of closeout and completion of the over 20 housing sites from these developments, development sites, which would convert about 7,000 units, which we will be able to make available for quick distribution to housing applicants across the country. 7,000 applicants, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in addition to completing the existing housing development sites, we also have embarked on our own housing construction program for the 2016 to 2018 period. And we've had two sub-turnings, I'm proud to say, that would add close to 200 new units to the east-west corridor, Madam Speaker, where the demand in the country is highest. These units are being built at a price point of between $400,000 to $550,000, Madam Speaker. We're returning the HDC to affordability.
Well done, well done.
Madam Speaker, we plan to construct another further 2,500 new units to several sites all across the country in San Fernando, Arima, El Dorado, Tableland, Canada, and Plaisance in Laventille. And Madam Speaker, an important initiative. During the Housing Construction Program 2016 to 2018, we have implemented a new quality control inspection program for all construction works, where we have identified, Madam Speaker, 22 critical stages to the construction process. And at the end of each stage, the works must be inspected and signed off by HDC personnel and the contractor. The new mechanism, Madam Speaker, takes a proactive approach to quality control and is expected to greatly improve the quality of housing received by the HDC from contractors. Prior to this new mechanism, Madam Speaker, prior to this being put in place, inspection was only done upon final completion. And therefore, if there was poor quality work, and there was a lot during the period 2010 to 2015, if there was poor quality work, Madam Speaker, where the defects occurred cannot be ascertained. And usually, there is the need for intensive snagging to correct these defects in the final product.
Snagging?
Snagging? When you go back after. The new inspection process, Madam Speaker, significantly reduces the need for snagging, as defects are detected at each stage of the construction process, thereby producing much higher quality final products. Madam Speaker, I now turn to key distributions. Over the last fiscal year, we were able to distribute 592 units to qualifying beneficiaries. And Madam Speaker, over the next fiscal, we would be distributing just around 2,000 units, and we expect to increase this over the years.
It's a great job, man.
You know, Madam Speaker, the member for Repuch East comes and he waves this 1,000 houses per week. 100 houses per week, Madam Speaker. But Madam Speaker, in their first year in office, they distributed 220 keys, Madam Speaker. 220 keys. Madam Speaker, there are a number of challenges that we face to distributing houses faster. The main challenge, Madam Speaker, being the state of disrepair that these units were allowed to degenerate to. On many occasions, we would have reached the stage of client walkthroughs, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we reach the stage of client walkthroughs. The client goes to the unit, they walk around the unit, they look at the unit, and they sign saying they accept the unit. Madam Speaker, many times over the year, we've had to press pause at the allocate. Madam Speaker, people message me all the time, crying, sending me videos and pictures of these units and the state of disrepair. Madam Speaker, the units were allowed to be vandalized, they were defective, they were allowed to fall into disrepair. And we've had to spend considerable sums of money to refurbish these units to get them to an acceptable state for distribution. Madam Speaker, we are presently working on our internal processes to increase the speed of allocations and distribution process, as well as the quality control initiative that I just mentioned. Madam Speaker, what is beneficial to know, what is interesting to know, Madam Speaker, is that in keeping with this government's role and goal to reduce waste and mismanagement, we have significantly reduced the cost of these key distributions, Madam Speaker. In the 8-month period, January 2015 to August 2015, the HDC, under the stewardship of the member for Oropouche East, 8 months, Madam Speaker, spent a total of $6.5 million on key distribution ceremonies. 27.
Oh my God. How much?
$6.5 million on key distribution ceremonies alone. Madam Speaker,
Is you sign is you? 6 million? So much? Roman roti.
you had a good time, probably. We don't know, because there were people attending the key distribution ceremony, sitting down there pretending to get keys, and went home without keys. Oh. And now they're coming to me, members of parliament are approaching me on the opposite side to ask me to sit down with groups of 10 and 15 and 20 people for keys, because they were promised. And they went to the ceremonies, and they ate food. Madam Speaker,
I was busy training children with guns.
And get drunk.
I was training children.
Madam Speaker, this is an average of $250,000 per key distribution. Madam Speaker, we have now reduced this cost down to $21,000. And further to that, Madam Speaker, I have instructed them at the HDC that we don't need ceremonies to distribute keys.
That's right.
Allocation of houses and the distribution of keys is within the ordinary day-to-day workings of the HDC.
Like the PRs, been everything.
They sign with a golden pen and
Madam Speaker, let me now turn to TTMF. The government has collaborated, we have collaborated in the past year with TTMF in an effort to increase the rate of mortgage conversions. But Madam Speaker, we also continually work with the TTMF to make home ownership as rewarding and as affordable and as accessible as possible. TTMF has always had a long strategic relationship with the Ministry of Housing relative to government's housing policy. At present, the TTMF has 2 affordable mortgage programs in order to assist citizens with affordable home ownership. A 2% mortgage program and a 5% mortgage program. The 2% mortgage program, Madam Speaker, offers 100% financing and an interest rate of 2% per annum for first-time homeowners earning $10,000 and under for the purchase of properties valued up to a maximum of $800,000. And in the 5% mortgage program, the offer is 95% financing at an interest rate of 5% per annum for first-time homeowners earning between $10,000 and $30,000 for the purchase of properties valued up to $1.2 million. And Madam Speaker, in an effort to make home ownership even more affordable, because as I said, Madam Speaker, and I will repeat it, affordability is the main pillar of government's housing policy. Madam Speaker, I want to thank the Minister of Finance in announcing that we are opening up these programs and making them more accessible and more affordable to first-time homeowners seeking to purchase their properties. We are expanding the program to capture more applicants, Madam Speaker, by increasing the maximum property value criterion from $850,000 to $1 million and $1 million to $1.5 million in the 2% and 5% programs respectively. And in the 2% program, Madam Speaker, we are increasing the qualifying income up to $14,000 per month. Madam Speaker, let me turn now to the private sector involvement. At present, we have over 160,000 applications for housing. And Madam Speaker, we cannot, and we do not expect to shoulder the entire burden of providing decent, affordable shelter to persons in need of government housing. We are creating an enabling environment and working with the private sector in meeting the huge housing demand for low and middle income earners. We intend to expand the housing stock by incentivizing the private sector with tax breaks, while at the same time revitalizing the economy by accelerating the housing construction sector through the use of private capital. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance in his budget indicated our intention to provide tax relief to firms who engage in the PPP approach in the construction sector. This initiative, Madam Speaker, would further excite and motivate developers already interested in partnering with the HDC for the development of housing units all across Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, but before that, we at the Ministry of Housing had already embarked on utilizing the PPP model in the development of land and in the construction of housing units in our housing construction program. We indicated very early on in our term that in light of our economic circumstances, we have to review our funding arrangements at the HDC. And earlier this year, the HDC invited expressions of interest from private entities and received an overwhelming response from those interested in investing private capital into government's housing program. And as of now, Madam Speaker, there are 20 projects that have been identified that we are looking to proceed with over the next few years. Just last month, Madam Speaker, the HDC completed a tender for the construction of a 160 apartment unit building in Mount Hope. A contractor would soon be selected for the start of this project on the understanding that the contractor would finance the construction and be paid using the proceeds of the sale of these units. These further 160 units would go a long way in satisfying the increasing demand for housing on the east-west corridor, where the demand is greatest, Madam Speaker. We are also providing tax exemptions for private developers of residential developments for housing. This was an initiative announced by the last administration, Madam Speaker, in the year 2013. I am happy to announce, Madam Speaker, that I have recently signed off and the regulations have only just been finalized. We are in the process of now inviting the registration of traders in newly constructed dwelling houses and land developers within the Ministry of Housing. This registration is a prerequisite for applying for an income tax exemption certificate. For traders in newly constructed houses, the construction of the home must have started after February 2013 and the total cost must not exceed $1.5 million. For land developers, Madam Speaker, the land development must have started on or after October the 1st, 2012 and must receive all the necessary planning permissions. Land development must not be less than an acre and each parcel of land to be sold must not be less than 5,000 square feet in size. We are in the process of preparing the regulations so that similar developers can also enjoy tax relief for the construction of multi-family dwelling units. All of this, Madam Speaker, will greatly ease the demand for housing and meet the needs of citizens seeking to call a place home. Madam Speaker, over the next 12 months, we are working on certain initiatives that I am sure will excite the residents of HDC developments nationwide and would also bring some relief to them. With respect to street lighting, Madam Speaker, in the lead up to the last general election, the HDC, under then member for Oropouche East, spent vast amounts of money on so-called emergency works, but could not find the capital contributions to install something as basic as street lighting to many of these HDC communities. It now falls to us to do it, Madam Speaker, and we will do it. Over the next 12 months, we will ensure that all the HDC communities have adequate street lighting in areas such as Greenvale, Edinburgh, Oasis, Fairfield, Hoover Exchange, Cumana, Pear Road, Cypress Gardens, and Taradale. Taradale, Madam Speaker. Taradale was built over 8 years ago. No street lighting.
Wow.
Another initiative we are pursuing is that over the next month, we will have formalized an agreement with all the major telecommunication providers for the complete rollout of cutting-edge telecommunications to the HDC communities nationwide. Residents will now have the power of choice in selecting their cable and internet providers as they benefit from an exciting world of ICT. Madam Speaker, in the next month, I also intend to recommission the Joint Protective Services Housing Committee. This was a committee that was conceived in 2007 and was fully operational up until the year 2010. The aim of this committee, Madam Speaker, was to provide members of the protective services with housing units in accordance with our policy of allocating 10% of all housing distributions. Madam Speaker, along with the Minister of National Security and representatives of the Joint Protective Services, this committee will ensure that members of the protective services have full access to government housing opportunities. And it does not end there, Madam Speaker. We will also seize the opportunity to discuss security issues within the HDC communities nationwide, and we will exchange information. Because at the HDC, Madam Speaker, we have to do our part in arresting this crime scourge. And we will do it with or without the support of the opposition members. And Madam Speaker, very shortly, we will finally complete the long-awaited Victoria Keys development.
Scandal.
And Madam Speaker, we will take it to the open market, and we will be inviting the public to purchase those units at open market prices.
Tell them why.
Madam Speaker, the project was started back in 2006 under the member for Diego Martin West. And like any other HDC estate, it was started to provide affordable, quality housing solutions to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And yesterday, Madam Speaker, the member for Oropouche East sought to argue that the reasons for the delays in this project and the reason for the escalation of costs was that the rooms were too small.
Member, could you kindly exit the chamber? Continue, member.
Yes, Madam Speaker. He sought to argue that the rooms were too small, the apartments were too small. That, Madam Speaker, is a value judgment, because I don't know what is wrong with a 700 square foot apartment targeted to a low-income earning family. So, Madam Speaker, but Madam Speaker, let us take his argument at its highest. Even if the member had an aversion for small 700 square foot apartments, I'd like to ask him, Madam Speaker, through you, what is the reason for putting a pool? Madam Speaker, what is the reason for building a tennis court and a clubhouse? Madam Speaker, what is the reason for putting gyms at the bottom floor in each apartment building? Madam Speaker, what is the purpose for putting elevators in the car park?
What kind of car park?
You see, Madam Speaker, they don't care about low-income and middle-income families in this country. They cared only for their elitist friends, and it's an elitist policy. And Madam Speaker, they didn't intend to go to the open market with these properties, you know.
Remember where the cap was?
They intended to give away to their friends on the cheap.
People they go ball it for.
Very early on, Madam Speaker, this government took the decision, hard decision, to offer these units at market value because we could not afford to subsidize these buildings any further. We could not support the decision to subsidize luxurious apartment dwellings. Madam Speaker, the good news is that the launch of the Victoria Keys development will take place very soon. It will be very exciting, Madam Speaker, and you will soon hear about it in the weeks to come.
Yeah, man.
Madam Speaker, let me now turn to Udicott.
Your 45 minutes are now expired. You're entitled to 10 more minutes.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I now turn to the aspect of my portfolio that treats with urban development. And the agency with that mandate is Udicott. It is essential that the national community understands that urban development is not centered in Port of Spain or in San Fernando, as the member for Caroni Central just alluded to. I would like to take this opportunity to alert the population that the development of urban spaces and infrastructure is necessary throughout the length and breadth of this country as we establish the platform for economic development that touches all. This is evidenced by a portfolio of projects, Madam Speaker, that touch all areas of the country, from the completion of the police and fire stations throughout Trinidad and Tobago, to the ramping up of works to renovate and restore heritage sites, such as Red House, Millfleurs, Stallmeyer's Castle, and Whitehall. It would be remiss of me not to mention that the Mayaro fire station is now in the process of handover. Madam Speaker, the Mayaro station was finally completed in September 2016 at a cost of $112 million, while a fire station in Pinal is targeted for completion in June 2017 at a cost of $110 million. The country may be assured that unlike the last administration, this PNM administration will not be opening fire stations, police stations, or hospitals while they are still construction sites. $500,000 for that ceremony for Hoover. Yeah. The revitalized Udicott will focus on serving the government and the people and not on misleading the people. Looking forward, notwithstanding the economic challenges we face, in 2017, the Udicott will play a key role in the implementation of major construction projects throughout Trinidad and Tobago through various public sector, private sector partnership models. In 2017, Udicott will undertake preliminary works on projects including the Invaders Bay, Salvatore Building Project, the San Fernando Waterfront Project, initiatives designed to not only attract investors, but also to create jobs directly in the construction and building maintenance spheres, as well as enabling sustainable jobs in the financial services and hospitality sectors. Udicott will continue its trust to provide facilities for athletes and sportsmen with, for example, the long-delayed completion to the Brian Lara Cricket Stadium in Tarouba by December 2016 at an estimated cost of $70 million, even below what we estimated at $90 million. That's $70 million, Madam Speaker. The completion of the Diego Martin Sporting Complex, Madam Speaker, by December 2017 at a cost of $135 million. These interventions will, along with housing, the Housing Trust of the HDC, form the foundation of government's interventions to stimulate activity in the local economy. In this new dispensation, Madam Speaker, Udicott will continue in its evolution from being primarily a cost center within the development agenda to a sustainable business model which generates reasonable revenues from its operations. UDCOT will continue to strengthen its internal capacity to manage its portfolio and developing business models to ensure sustainability of its operations to maximize return on investments in these properties. The benefits of this focus on internal efficiencies and business principles can already be seen through the leasing of new retail spaces in the Parkade facility in Port of Spain. Finally, Madam Speaker, in line with the thrust to assist in stimulating the economy, UDCOT launched the Micro and Small Contractors Incubator Program, which seeks to develop the financial and technical capabilities of small contractors through their participation in contracts that vary in price from $500,000 to $5 million. In the first instance, this program will see the initiation of 10 community centers, which started in September 2016, and will expand, Madam Speaker, to the refurbishing and construction of new community centers in 64 additional areas across the country in the next few years. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, I would say that under my direction, under the direction of this administration, we will return the National Housing Program to its policy foundations. We will leverage the relationships between the HDC, the TTMF, and the private sector. And Madam Speaker, we know the journey will not be easy, but we are the PNM. And Madam Speaker, before my time runs out, allow me to pay particular attention, commendation, tribute. Allow me to pay a tribute, allow me to express my heartfelt thanks to the member for Port of Spain South.
Oh, yeah.
Madam Speaker, for laying the foundation and for assisting me in the early days in getting out of the blocks and running. Madam Speaker, I could not have done it that quickly without her assistance. And Madam Speaker, I pay tribute to them. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Diego Martin West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I joined this debate to make a few comments and observations and to contribute towards clarifying the government's work program going forward, and also to indicate where we're at in terms of our assumption of responsibility for the country's management. There are those who would have you believe, Madam Speaker, that you can or should report on the future with no reference to your current location, and even so, to your point of origin. But I want to begin by congratulating the Minister of Finance for a job well done.
Thank you.
So well done has the job been that a significant number of citizens are in fact saying that they expected worse in the national budget.
Yep.
Because these are people, the vast majority of our citizens, who would publicly and more so privately accept that we are in fact as a nation in a difficult situation. Like a household, there are good times when there are inflows into the household which would permit a certain kind of lifestyle, but something might happen, father might die, somebody lose their job, whatever, but something might happen that would have caused the inflow to be not as generous as you've been accustomed to. And then you have a choice. You have a choice to continue to pretend that nothing has changed and then you get yourself into difficulty. Or you can choose to adjust. And sometimes the adjustment may mean hardship, but it is not all hardships that are meant to destroy. I always remember my uncle who died and left his wife with 4 daughters. They were, I think 2 were teenagers and the other 2 were younger. And he died very suddenly, in his 40s. And the mother had never worked before. And they had precious little savings. And she was confronted with this situation. But I grew up watching her, dealing with it, assuming responsibility for her children, and facing the difficulty with dignity, and raised 4 outstanding children. And that impressed me. And I'm saying to Trinidad and Tobago, the first thing we have to do is to acknowledge that circumstances have changed and have changed considerably. I, as leader of the government, it's my duty to bring to the national attention what the current circumstances are and how they have changed. Because if we don't appreciate how they have changed, then our behavior might not change as required by the circumstances. And when I make these comments about our circumstances, there are those who would say I'm preaching doom and gloom. Doom and gloom is for those who accept it as doom and gloom. But for others who accept it as reality, then I'm simply providing clear, unambiguous analysis of our circumstances. And of course, you know, we'll get all kinds of advice. All kinds of advice. Yes, this government set out to get advice. But in many instances, it is the gratuitous advice that one has to be careful with. The structured advice can be very useful, and is being very useful. But we do accept a lot of advice, and we've opened ourselves to advice. Some of the advice we're getting is that don't touch anything. In fact, there's one member of parliament who says that it is the business of the new government to continue what the last government was doing. In which case one would argue, why have an election at all? And then there are others who believe, okay, the budgeting exercise is a wish list. You have a revenue stream, you have an expenditure expectation. If they can't meet, then you borrow and close the gap. That's one approach. Another approach is, your revenue is 10, your expenditure must be 10. If it looks like 15, cut 5. Mathematics done, case closed. But these are all simplistic understandings. Because for every cut you make, you know, it's not just cutting money or cutting a budget. You're cutting opportunities for families directly or indirectly. Opportunities, because what the national budget does is sustain opportunity or create opportunity. For those who have jobs in the public service, the national budget maintains your opportunity. It might even create new opportunities for new employment. And for those who are in the business sector or who support all kinds of services and provide goods to the country, the national budget may create opportunities. And because of the lopsided nature of our economy, where way back in the days when oil was $2 a barrel, this country's economy was driven by first, employment in the oil sector as the best opportunities, and then by the earnings in the oil sector when we nationalized those companies that became national companies, Chintok, Petrochin, and so on. And we've lived in that way, that a significant input of inflows allowed all governments to be the driving force in our economy. This is not news to us. That's how we've lived. And we've tried to change it. Went from oil to gas. We used to flare gas in this country. Then we had a policy of using that gas, compress the low pressure gas, and create a gas industry and so on. Today we live on that. And government supported the farmers, built roads, built schools, and everything you do, you need people to operate them, you create employment, and you grew the public service. And then we said, okay, we have to share what the country has with those who didn't get opportunities. So we create a whole plethora of social programs. And over time, the social programs became entitlements, where some people don't even bother to look for opportunities, but demand that the social programs take them from cradle to grave. Of course, we don't want to encourage that, but we all know it's happening. And of course, there are those who believe that there's money in the country. Some people have money, and if you have a gun, you frighten somebody, or you even kill them and take what they have. And that is the society, unfortunately. But then, you know, those of us who have the responsibility for running the country's affairs, we are the ones that the country look to hold it together in a difficult period. And that's what this government is doing. And that's what this Minister of Finance has done. And he's done a really, really good job in the area. It sounds good coming from certain quarters to say, cut the expenditure. But they could say that because they are coming to nobody. Nobody vote for them. Nobody asked them to look after their affairs. And there are others who would say, don't touch nothing. And then you wouldn't be here when you bankrupt the country. Because we know, especially parliamentarians should know, because all of us have been through this. We know what the government is having to do, and many of us know the difference between a good decision and a bad decision. But some of us deliberately support stupid talk because we believe we can prosper by that. I heard a comment from one of my colleagues. I think, I'm not sure which one it was, and said that, you know, oh, you don't, he's not open to this talk about allegations of corruption, because if you do that, that's what the children will hear, and the children will believe that we are all corrupt, and then the young men will believe that therefore they could go and take guns or approach east. And if the young men will hear that we are all living nice by corruption, and they will go and take guns to go and take somebody, get somebody money too. Utter rubbish.
Typical.
I entered this parliament in 1987, and for 5 years, non-stop, my ears were ringing O'Halloran and Pravat. They spawned political parties, those two names. But all of a sudden, an incumbent government is not supposed to report on what the last government did. Well, let me give you all some advice now. This government will tell this population about everything that the last government did. And who doesn't like it too bad for you? Because it is because you understand what happened in the past that you'll be in a position to understand what we're dealing with now and to understand what the future holds for us and why this government is doing what it is doing. And if you have no cocoa in the sun, don't buy no umbrella. Come with that at all. We're not buying that at all. Don't say anything. You are the government now. Yes, we know we're the government now. And that is why we have to report to the people on the circumstances and why we are doing what we have to do now. And we'll do it every day if we have to, so that the population will understand where we've lost opportunities, where we are making opportunities, and worse, where persons have betrayed the public trust. And any person who has betrayed the public trust, if you leave no footprint, you leave no fingerprint, good boy. But if we find fingerprints and we find footprints, the wheels of justice turn, and they turn very slowly, and they're turning in Trinidad and Tobago. Another difficulty I have is that we need to learn from our experience. Our approach east, who seem to have a particular passion for nastiness, he, my colleague from our approach east, the distinguished gentleman, oversaw a program called Land for the Landless. We from the opposition questioned that program, and the government answered. Every single thing the program aimed to do and did was in a constituency of the UNC. And we said, but what kind of program is this? That was exposed. Yes. The Land for the Landless program was land for the UNC constituencies. Yeah. It was exposed. And you think they will withdraw No, he comes to the parliament in this budget debate and accuses this government of discrimination because we have not continued with our discriminating program. So we're stupid. A program that was geared by him and his colleagues to discriminate against PNM constituencies, we must continue to please him. The answer is no. No program geared to discriminate against anybody in this country will find favor with this government. None. Don't talk about corruption. My colleagues Eric Williams and Frankie Khan, they were drummed out of office in the parliament. It was in the parliament that the MP for Siparia came and lambasted Eric Williams. Eric Williams was eventually charged. There were conspiracy theories, but of course, don't do that. And of course, my colleague from Chaguanas West, he was the best. He came to this parliament with a truckload of documents, triplicate, quadruplicate, and made the case that the member of parliament for Diego Martin West was stealing sand and gravel and blocks in Tobago. Remember that story? Subject of commission of inquiry, integrity commission, all of that. But all of a sudden, no reference should be made about what happens to anybody in this country. Wishful thinking. Wishful thinking. But the budget, I noticed, was studiously ignored. The budget, the numbers, revenue, expenditure, debt, repayment, all of that was studiously ignored by the opposition. I went through the text of the member for Siparia. Painful. And with your leave, Madam Speaker, I just want to make a few comments on a couple of the nuggets that she gave us. Nugget number one, she named the budget Tales from a Strange Land. And that is the best name she could have ever given the stewardship that she oversaw in the last 5 years. And she talked about, imagine the government of Trinidad and Tobago levying some tax of some kind. And the opposition leader talks about no taxation without representation. And I had to ask myself, who wrote that speech for her? She could not have written that speech for two reasons. One, it was so full of folly, and it was so long that when her 3 hours were up, she had half of the pages untouched. So somebody wrote it for her. And the least she could have done was to read it over and realize it was a 6-hour speech. And worse, you don't come to Trinidad and Tobago, this proud republic, and talk about no taxation without representation. Who is in this house? How did we get here? We are all here through the law called Representation of the People Act. And if a tax is levied by the authority of the Minister of Finance or this house, what nonsense. This goes back to the US independence, when they were fighting the English. When America was an English colony, and they were being taxed from London, and they had no say in what tax London placed on them in America. In Boston, they decided to resist the British taxation through the Boston Tea Party, and this is the no taxation without representation. But somebody heard that and gave it to her to come here and read. And no taxation without representation, and that such tax can only come through consultation with the people. Absolute rubbish. It was a rant, and she herself called it that, rant, Tales from a Strange Land. And of course she was appalled that then screaming headlines about bloody murder, 2 or 3 murders, and the murders are 400 plus in September. They so want to see the murder rate reach 5,000 a year that they're always out there, 400 plus. Where? Where did the opposition leaders see 400 murders by September? In a situation where some people have been murdered. I saw a man was murdered by a stone. They used a stone to kill him up in Cora. Many persons have used knives to kill their family members, their loved ones. Of course, we could fight to find the guns and the ammunition and so on, and the police is stepping up the game and doing a good job in closing down the number of items of that nature. But if there are people in their homes that want to kill their own loved ones and killing them under stone, how much banning can we do? But you come into Parliament and talk about 400 plus murders. Well, madam, my colleague, it is not 400 yet, and I'm hoping there'll be no more for the year. But obviously you are anxious to read the headline of 400 murders because they had this stupid talk about when PNM is in government, murders go up. Absolute nonsense. But of course, if you want to engage the budget numbers, you talk that kind of story. And of course, you know, comes to the Parliament in the budget debate, we're having ignored the budget, talking about she's a defender of the governor of the central bank. Well, let me tell my friend from Siparia something. The governor of the central bank, who was left there by the last government, when the Minister of Finance told me what the governor was doing, I asked the Minister of Finance one question. Do you have confidence in the governor of the central bank? The Minister of Finance hesitated to answer. I repeated the question. Do you have confidence in the governor of the central bank? He hesitated. I said to him, in the event that you don't have confidence in the governor of the central bank and difficulties arise with this government, you will be held accountable. When the Minister of Finance came to the cabinet and reported to the cabinet about the behavior of the governor of the central bank, the cabinet which I led, under the oath of acting without fear or favor, malice or ill will, had no difficulty in dismissing the governor of the central bank. And if the governor of the central bank has a problem, he's taking the country to court, go there. He sent one member of parliament in the other house to accuse the government of racism, and he sent the other one in this house to accuse us of persecution. And the opposition didn't stay there, you know. She didn't stay there. She appointed herself in the budget debate defender of the president. And she accused us, or whoever else, that the president is being attacked, being harassed, and forced to engage in a war of words. We know that the president's conduct or actions are not to be subject of debate in this house. Am I being invited to respond to this, Madam Speaker? Can I respond to this?
I will ask you to be very, very, very careful so that you don't offend the rule.
Thank you very much. And I would leave it right there. I'm just simply making the point. Because I can respond to the president on the pavement outside. And I say no more on the matter. But I was quite astounded that the leader of the opposition could ignore the budget and come into the parliament and seek to be a defender of a president who's under siege. And if there are questions for the president to answer, it is not for the opposition leader to come in the parliament and attack the government over it. And she says, my friend from Siparia, distinguished lady, that the government is investing billions in a stadium which can be put to no tangible use. Is the member for Siparia serious? And she said that we are still to get to the heart of the corruption at Taruba Stadium. If after 5 years of your stewardship, we haven't got to the heart of this Taruba, when are you going to get to it? You try to get to the heart of Las Alturas. You spend $40 million feeding lawyers, changing nothing. But you so want to read somebody else's speech that they wrote for you. They come and talk about we spending billions. So what is she advising us to do? Whatever we spent on Taruba, she's saying to us, leave it there to rot. We accept the advice to be dismissed. We're not doing that. We will complete the stadium and put it to use. It might have been overpriced. It might have been overpriced. There might have been corrupt practice or incompetence. But at the end of the day, we have spent significant monies on it. And over time, it will become part of the infrastructure of the nation. As a matter of fact, when it's completed at the end of the year, it will be the main public cricket venue in Trinidad and Tobago. But her advice to us is to leave it there the same way she left this fishing market in Carnage. The same way she left we're not doing that. This government is, Bish, I'm glad you mentioned that. Bish, thanks for reminding me. When the Bish High School was built, I was in the opposition. There were issues about that school. It was built under an IDB program. The member for Tewarie was the Minister of Education.
No.
And she had two distinguishing features. One, she bought BHO's warehouse and created Kamlasek as a school. Sackville Street. A furniture warehouse on Sackville Street was bought for Laventille children. Good. The one at Bish had an issue of the structure and allegations of gas. The IDB engaged engineer Burgess to look at the Bish school. The Burgess report indicated that this school that was built for about $40 million could not be utilized as built, and therefore the money apparently was wasted. The school was not opened under Mrs. Kamla Prasad Bisesa, Minister of Education. Wow. She was the minister in July of the year. Serious? And I sat here in this country for years and watched a political party led by her and my friend from Caroni East twist that story into saying that the PNM didn't open the B school because we have something against Indian children and we're racial. And she was the minister. The school, the construction was finished, but the school could not be opened. Yeah, what is
insinuating race on the part of the side.
I am.
Honorable Member, I overrule you. There was no insinuation of race. The member was reporting something that another member said.
I am not insinuating anything. I'm stating something. I am not afraid of the term race, you know. I am not afraid to engage in discussion of race in this country. I live in a multiracial society. Exactly. And if there are people who set out to misrepresent the facts, I am quite happy to correct it. I'm simply saying those are the facts. And all along, I have listened in amazement.
Member for Naparima, I don't agree with you. Please continue, Member for Diplomatic.
I don't know why they are so upset.
Afraid of the truth.
I don't want any advice from my friend from Caroni East. Please. I am thank you for reminding me to put on the Hansard what I just said. Because the time has come for that to have been put there. And I'm sure many of you know, my friend from Cuba North, I'm sure she didn't even know that. I'm sure that my friend from Cuba North, the young MP, she didn't know that.
Tewarie closed the school.
I was in a position when that happened. Go and ask the IDB for a copy of the Burgess report and read it July of 1995. And ask, you know, but the bottom line is, too many, as a matter of fact, my colleague from Chaguanas East this morning explained it very well. Chaguanas West. He said, and he quoted somebody saying, an American, whatever, saying that the thing to do is to put out some misinformation and lies and let them focus on that. And that controls the conversation and take you away from the actual facts. That is what has happened with the beach school. But I say no more on that. I simply want to just comment on a few things. One, yesterday I saw my colleague from Orapooch East busting a mark and, as the paper say, dropping a bomb about children handling guns. And I wonder if there are any limits when you're in the political arena. Because it is not that a bomb was dropped by that information. It was that a serious breach had taken place. Because if the facts are as they are, that those children were under the supervision and control of the state's security services, and those children were photographed by elements of the state's security services, and that members of parliament put them open to the world, two things happen here. The officer who would have taken that picture and to have publicized it as part of the work going on at Camp Komoto, that officer would have breached a level of security and has created a threat for the children of the Attorney General. But secondly, I want to ask Orapuch is something. Since when his eyes open so? When the member of parliament was in a hotel in Cascade, sniffing and snorting and talking, and the whole world knew who the minister was, they didn't know. But the back of a photograph, the back of a child, you know who it is now. You could look at the back of a child and know who the father is, but you couldn't know your colleague was in Cascade snorting. But I want to say something about the National Security Services. I want to appeal to those fortunate persons who are in our security system, especially those who are charged with the responsibility of protecting officers of state and their families, that they have a duty and they must have some respect for the job that they carry out.
Normal protocols.
Because if it is that you lose confidence in the people around you who are to safeguard you from those who would want to harm you, I'd rather be without them, you know. I'd rather be without them. Because passing that information to an opposition person to come and bust a mark in the parliament is meant to harm. And if a person close to you who's detailed and paid to secure you will take steps to try to harm you and your family, you don't want them near you.
Twisting the truth.
Understand that? So I see that now. It would have come from the security services. And you know what they tell me now? Anywhere I'm going as Prime Minister, I must tell them where I want to go so they could tell somebody and be down there. And I'm saying I'm safer if you don't know. Because if I am to tell you long in advance where I'm going, and you are prepared to pass information to people like that, why am I not to believe that I'm exposed if you tell the world I'm going to be at point A, point B at time A, point time B? This is a very serious matter, you know. Very serious matter.
And they thumped the desk
yesterday. Recently, I had to remove Special Branch from the Prime Minister's detail because they went on a platform and said that they can't guarantee the Prime Minister's security. And the parliamentarians who are supposed to hold people accountable for the jobs that they are, come to Parliament as a mark. As a mark that should frighten all of us. It's a mark that should frighten all of us because it means it is irresponsible on the part of the officer who took that picture. Let me ask you a question, Madam Speaker. Do you think those children went in Camp Komoto and took up those guns and they went to walk and look, whatever they did?
He said they were playing.
They were under the supervision of the highest level of security in the country. They were under the highest level personal security in this country. They're supposed to be the cream of the crop.
They were brought there by them.
And it ends up on some page. But I'm not surprised, you know. I'm not surprised. That is the same member of parliament who put a banner across Orapuch Road, protect your children from Rowley, when I was being accused of pedophilia.
He said he's proud of Vanilla too.
And he was the author and finisher of the Vanilla attack on me and my dead father. So the level of indecency that seeps through the UNC. And I'm appealing, sit down, I'm appealing to you, my colleague from St. Augustine.
I'm a member of the
I'm appealing.
And he is calling me indecent. I'm a member of the and he's calling me indecent.
Members, member for Laventille West, member for Laventille West, member for St. Joseph. Member for Diego Martin West, continue, please.
Mr. Speaker, I've lost considerable time. I would like to have it back, please. I was saying to my colleague from St. Augustine, in the absence of leadership on that side, I'm holding you personally responsible for bringing back some basic decency over there.
He can't make with that.
I want to say something to my colleague from Couva South, who has been the normal disturber in this house recently. I'm glad he's got his voice back, Madam Speaker. Because for 5 years in the government, I didn't hear him.
Mouth was full.
And more than that, the one time I really listened to hear him, I didn't hear him. A man went on a public platform in Couva and called his name and accused him of having 4 CPEP contracts. Up to this day, I have not heard a sound from him. But every time you come in the parliament, he has something to say. I wonder if in one of these disturbances...
You have 48-6.
Madam Speaker.
Member for Couva South, I don't uphold the objection. Continue, please. Member.
Yeah, good.
Member, I would just ask you to withdraw that statement.
Madam Speaker.
Thank you. So it's withdrawn?
Yes. Yep.
So it is withdrawn?
Yes.
Thank you. Continue, Diego Martin.
I was trying to help him. I was saying to him that it has been put on the public record. It has been put on the public record on live television, live radio, by a speaker on a political platform that he, as minister, had 4 CPEP contracts. And to this day, I have not heard a sound of response from him. But you come to the parliament and everybody gets up here, he's down there going, what is that? Madam Speaker, we have in the government done a number of things. And one of the things I've done, before I go there, let me since we're dealing with the marks, they felt that what they have to do in the budget response is the bottleneck. The member for Siparia, where she was a mark about Answer McCall and the government being in a conspiracy. I simply want to say to the member for Siparia, in that performance that was so despicable, that it is that kind of behavior of coming to the parliament and unwarranted and unjustifiably calling people's names, people who have been persuaded and who reluctantly leave the comfort of the private sector and agree to come and assist and work in the public sector. Those persons will find it less and less doable and acceptable when the leader of the opposition could come into the parliament and call the names of Jerry Brooks, Alison West, Terence Farrell, Alison Lewis, sorry, Terence Farrell, and other people. These are all very distinguished national citizens who have a contribution to make, if they are so minded, who have been persuaded by the government to take responsibility for a variety of things. And if in so doing, all that will happen to them is that irresponsible members of parliament will come to the parliament and do what the opposition leader did. It means that other people will want to have nothing to do with the public sector. And maybe that is the intention. So in the end, the public sector will be managed by persons who are either incompetent or corrupt, or incompetent and corrupt. That is what they're aiming to do, you know. Because when the opposition leader can come here and the mark that she busts, take 20 pages to bust it, and all she gets from it is a scolding on the front page of The Guardian that she was wrong and malicious. That does not do anything for this house. It makes all of us as parliamentarians look foolish.
Speech from us because of that.
And then, of course, there was another one. There was that one that was the one with the children, the guns. This one was Answer McCall. There was something. Oh, the other one. Tabakit. He bust a mark about some $200 and something million contract that was given out on the port. Now, taxpayers hearing these things would think that, oh my heavens, You know, the country is falling apart and look at what's happening. But what they don't understand is that these statements are meant to resist change, and change that is meant for the benefit of taxpayers. I was very surprised to find out recently, when this situation on the port and the changeover of the management of the ferries took place, I was surprised to find out that I think it's 11 or 12 years. Yes. How many years?
10 years.
10 years we bought those ferries. And for 10 years, we have been paying $6.5 million a month for persons to help us operate the ferries.
The transition.
No transition. Look, $6.5 million a month. And what is happening there? The people who are doing it, they are required to have understudies to train our nationals so they could take over. And every time it comes up for a transition, these beneficiaries say they're not ready, they're not competent. We who took over BOAC from the British and have been flying pillars since the 60s, we can't carry a ferry to Tobago. We who ran a ferry service here from 1962 to now as an independent nation, paying foreigners $6 million a month. And after 10 years, you try to change it, and somebody comes to Parliament with a mouthful of misinformation, trying to give the impression that something out of the ordinary is happening. Well, I didn't know that before. I know now. That is going to come to an end. One of the legacies of this country, knock wood, is our safety record on BWIA and CAL. And we can't manage a ferry going to Tobago. Well, we'll do what we have to do, but this kind of rape and raid will stop. And anybody who come here making a case for that to continue, as Lloyd Best will say, them is people to watch. Madam Speaker, I hate to refer to my colleague from our approach, but I have to go back there. He came to this Parliament, my friend from our approach, and said and admitted that the state of disrepair of the residence for the Prime Minister in Tobago was such that it required $2 million. And when he went to the cabinet, of which he was a part, to get that done, he was virtually chased out of the cabinet because $2 million was too much to spend. That $2 million is 1 weekend of partying in Tobago at Cocoa Reef.
As a matter of fact.
And of course, the security will tell you that whenever the Prime Minister stays at a hotel, the cost of the security alone, because of the configuration of the visit, escalates because you have to have a certain kind of security platform, as against if the Prime Minister is in the location of a house. When I go to, I've been the Prime Minister here for a year. And let me put it on the record. I am quite comfortable in my house, in Mason Hall, in Tobago. And that is where I go when I go to Tobago. Let's start with that. But when I do that, two police officers, is the sum total of my security detail at my compound. And of course, sometimes maybe they get into my private space, but say what? The bottom line is, this country is called Trinidad and Tobago. And I think it is a disgrace that in Tobago, the residence of the Prime Minister at Blemming could have been left to rot. And whether I go there or not, under this government, that building that has been destroyed in Tobago through neglect will be pulled down, and we are going to build a Prime Minister's house in Tobago. Because you see, the people of Trinidad, if they are to meet the Prime Minister or the President, they know where to meet them, in a decent place. But the people of Tobago have nowhere to meet the Prime Minister, because the Prime Minister's house has been left to rot. And that is a signal to every Tobago child how they're viewed in the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. I will fix that. But in the meantime, we're spending millions. I have all the information here, I don't have the time to go through it. Millions in hotels, millions of dollars every time you go to Tobago, right? And of course, the population, not being the wiser, will join them in their folly. The Prime Minister going to build a Prime Minister house in Tobago. Yes, it's the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm quite comfortable with the house I built on Rowley land. And if I never set foot in there, I still see it as a duty to have in Tobago a decent residence for the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And in case my friend from Sipaya has a problem, the $500,000 you see in the budget is not to build anything. It is to put us in a position to build something, to pay for the architectural drawings and the preparations to do that. And who doesn't like it? Sorry. The bottom line. Yeah, I mean, one business in Tobago, one of many. It's all there. $500,000 a time.
$500,000?
$500,000 a visit.
$1 million for a lunch.
Right?
One trip by Tewarie. $1 million for the car.
And then,
$1 million?
Notice. Member for Diego Martin, Northeast. Continue, please, the member for Diego.
But, Madam Speaker, I want to go away from that, from those responses for the moment, because really, my colleague on the other side did not engage the budget.
Excuse me.
They used the opportunity that was given to them to either explain themselves for what they did, try to revisit and review and revise history, or to deal with peeves that they were carrying before the budget was ready. I listened to quite a number of members. I can't really point to anything in the budget, the substance of the budget, that was engaged by members opposite. So now that the debate is ending, and we go out into committee, I hope that at committee stage, they will have something to contribute to the actual budget, because the talk that came through here had nothing to do with the budget. Permit me a few minutes, Madam Speaker, to demonstrate and to inform you how we have been proceeding at the level of the Office of the Prime Minister in managing the governmental areas by way of tapping into the resource base of the whole country. We've appointed a number of committees, and those committees afforded us the opportunity to bring into the decision and management process persons who otherwise would not have been part of the process. We established a standing committee on infrastructure, and that committee oversees and guides the government's actions.
45 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 10 more minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This Standing Committee of Infrastructure involves all the relevant ministries and technical people involved, and I can just tell you a number of the projects that fall under the ambit of that committee. The Sir Solomon Rochai Highway Extension to Point 14 is under that committee's work that we have been able to conclude the removal of OAS, and we are now preparing to restart the project and to continue the promise of a highway to Point 14. The Wallafield to Manzanilla Road, that is also there, and NIDCO is in the process of formalizing approval and clearance processes for this project to go on. The Valencia to Toco Highway, that also is a major infrastructural project, including the port at Toco. These are projects in the in conceptual stage and inception. There's a demand for information and for consultation, and it goes stage by stage. And at the appropriate time, all the relevant things will be done towards the execution of that project. And of course, the Scarborough Ring Road, that's another project, Chaguaramas Access Road, Chaguanas Bypass, and so on. These are major infrastructural projects which will bring life to the economy, create opportunities through construction, create employment opportunities, and at the same time expand our economy into areas which we are not now. With respect to the other committees, which, like the Economic Advisory Board, that in itself is quite an impressive committee, which is bringing to bear the professional and technical assessment of a lot of areas of governmental activity and providing, and they've already provided to the government, a number of position papers on particular matters, some of which we have referred to them specifically for their attention, and that attention guides the cabinet. We are in the area of education. We have two committees operating there. One looking at the early childhood and primary education, and we want to make a sea change in there. I don't have time to go into the details now, but as we continue into the Parliament, into the weeks and months ahead, we will share information with you, and we expect that our colleagues opposite will engage, that we could change the national perspective and landscape on these things. We also have a professional group working to create a referee document on the history of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. That's a fundamental document which will preserve our history in appropriate documentation and protect us from revision by those who will change our history to suit themselves. That's that. And that report is due in by January 2017, and we hope that it will be there. The whole question of healthcare delivery, we put that into the hands of a very experienced committee chaired by Dr. Winston Welsh. They have given us the initial report. One item has been left out because there was no consensus on the item, and it was the item of private practice in the public healthcare delivery. That document is now with the Office of the Prime Minister, and all of these documents, it is our intention to get them into the Parliament so that the parliamentary committees can benefit from those inputs. And hopefully we as parliamentarians will take off our partisan hats that seem to blind our eyes and proceed to use the inputs of these national professionals who have given us their service in most instances for free.
Prime Minister, would you give me this for one? Would you consider?
Only if it makes sense.
Yes. Would you consider the Gladys Gafool Commission of Inquiry recommendations in addition to this as well? We had done quite a lot on it. I'll ask you to consider it.
I was only going to give way to you if it's going to make sense. But the committee, the Welsh committee of 2016, would have considered all that went before, so that in 2016 going forward, any actions we take would have the benefit of any platform or foundation that existed before. So I don't want to engage no Gladys Gafool report. Right? The Welsh committee would have done that because they are professional people. You should know they're your colleagues. You should know that. And of course, there's one I must touch on, and it's the whole question of Chagaramas. Madam Speaker, the government of Trinidad and Tobago is a continuum, and government's actions bind other governments. At Chagaramas, there has been some very unsavory developments at Chagaramas with respect to the behavior of the board of Chagaramas under the last government. This morning you would have heard the minister, member for North St. Anne's West, Minister of the Prime Minister's office, say that there are issues about land distribution at Chagaramas which will attract the attention of the Attorney General in protection of the public interest. There are other issues down there about persons who have made investments on property leased to them under various circumstances. What this government did with respect to some of those projects, one in particular, the major one, which is the one which has literally taken up the entire waterfront in Chagaramas, that has been left. Because one has to understand that as we speak now, or when they were doing that recently, from West Moorings right down to Five Islands, virtually the entire waterfront has disappeared under private control. And there's virtually no place where the state can come to land from the sea except the last piece of area that the last board of Chagaramas adjudicated out for development. I'm not at this point talking about the details, except that there's a requirement for public interest to be served by an amendment and review of those leases, and that particular lease attracted the attention of the cabinet, it being the main one. As Prime Minister, this matter came before the Cabinet. I instructed the Cabinet to put an ad hoc committee led by the Minister of Finance, the Minister, the Office of the Prime Minister, and the Minister for the CDA to review this situation and to communicate with those persons who have been put in that position by the last government. I can report to you today that it is this government's intention, one way or the other, to have that particular lease amended so that the public interest would be preserved. It is the intention of this government, if there is no agreement on this approach, well then, the government, I am awaiting the outcome. The chairman of that ad hoc committee is advising me that the holders of that particular lease has agreed to give up some substantial part of it so as to have the public interest protected. If that is so, and it comes to pass, and the project can then be properly cleared in a way that private sector investment and the protection of the public interest can be had, then all is well that ends well. Madam Speaker, this government wants to encourage investment, but we are not going to encourage investment at the expense of the public interest. And if this particular lessee has seen it fit to agree to cooperate with the government and amend the lease, then all I can do is to say thank you very much for being public spirited, because anybody who gets a good deal would be a fool to walk away from a good deal. But if a good deal has developments which can conflict with the public interest, it is the responsibility of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, all of us who took an oath of office, to act without fear or favor, without malice or ill will, to rectify any and all misallocations that took place. Madam Speaker, I want to end on one note, and it's a note that lifted my spirit no end, and it is this: regardless of how dark it is, one flashing insect can fly, or one match struck could be seen for miles. And I hope, Madam Speaker, that this nation saw Lillian Williams, that young lady who yesterday made this nation proud. I want to say that when I saw that story, my spirit soared. And I wondered how many more parents there are in this country who raised a child like that. Yes. And the milk of human kindness that flowed through that young lady to go and see and help that disabled person in that wheelchair. Yes. And he said to her that he was hungry. And she went and she cut him a sandwich, and she came back and she fed him that sandwich. Wow. Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago. Lillian Williams represents Trinidad and Tobago.
Your speaking time has expired. Members, it's now 4:16.
Well done,
do I have your concurrence for us to take? Do I have your concurrence to take the suspension now? And we will resume at 5 o'clock.